Hi everyone, I'm really keen to get colouring in this book. It's only arrived today and I'm going to colour in it straight away. So it is RJ Hampson's new book, Lost in Time, a Mr Fogherty colouring book. And we're going to colour the first page in the book, Fly Envious Time. It's set in the present day and Mr Fogherty has a revelatory dream about the arc of time. So I'm going to get stuck in with some alcohol markers, but just to remind you, if you're new to the channel, I have actually coloured the first section of Around the World, so basically a whole book, and I have used markers of varying types, so water-based and alcohol markers, with coloured pencil over it to colour this book, and I will probably do something similar with this book here. So if you haven't seen it already and you're interested to see the full book coloured, I do have a flip through of that on the channel. I'll try and remember to put it in the description box. So I'm going to use Ohuhu markers today, alcohol markers, and if you're not familiar with them, they do have a chisel tip and a fine bullet tip. I don't have the brush set here. So that's the set I'm going to use. I have the 200 colour set. I don't know if it had a name or a code or anything like that, but it's the 200 colour set of Ohuhu alcohol markers. I do also have the 66 pastel set of Arrtx Oris markers. That's the lovely box that they come in. So what I'm lacking in the Ohuhus, I will supplement with the Arrtx and possibly some other cheaper brands, because my Ohuhu set is starting to dry out a little bit. So I do have a few markers that I can't use out of that one. Right, so I think that's covered just about everything. So this first one I'm going to base with the alcohol markers and then see whether I want to put coloured pencil over the top. So I have some backing sheets in here to protect the other pages, and I'm just going to jump in. So I think, being that it appears to be a night sky, I've got bits of something in here already. It appears to be a night sky because they look like stars that are around that and a moon. I might try and keep it more subdued colours to suggest that it's nighttime, but I'm not really going to go into any special effects or anything to achieve that, but I'm going to try and keep the colours quite muted, I think. So to start with, I might actually start with him, because I find that that then gives me a good idea of where I want to go with the rest of the page. So what I might do, I'm just going to take one of those backing sheets out, and I'm going to use it off to the side to scribble some colours on and see whether they're the right colours that I want. They look very similar. See, that's very dry, but I can get a bit of colour out of that end. So what I think I might use is G468. This is Petits Pois, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. I don't speak any language other than English, and I don't do that very well either as a rule. So what I'm going to do, I have to use the chisel tip on this Chartreuse green, G487, because the other end is drying out. So I'm going to use the Chartreuse green as the lighter areas of Mr Fogherty. And then I'm going to use the other one, the G468, to start to bring in a little bit of deeper colour, just to start some definition off. So what I do, if you're not familiar with the channel, is that I tend to sit the marker in the cap loosely in my hand so that I can keep working back and forward with the markers. And what I try to do is I sometimes muddle the caps up, but what I try to do is work with the markers before the ink gets to dry too much, and I blend the colours on the page like that. So I don't necessarily layer my colours very often. Occasionally I do, but my favourite way to work is to do this. So while the marker is still wet, or the ink is still wet, I will try to blend in any deeper colour that I want while it is still wet. Now I probably should have left his skin under there a bit lighter, but I haven't, so I will show you a little trick that I try. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a go. When I forget myself, I just jumped in here without too much thought because I was so excited about the book coming. I just love getting new RJ Hampson books. It really is a treat, and I've been feeling a little bit flat lately. I've been colouring, but I haven't always been feeling the same level of enjoyment that I normally do. So this has perked me up to have this book arrive today. So what I'm using is a colourless blender. My colourless blender with the Ohuhu has dried out. So this one is one that I bought in a 2-pack from an art store near me, and the brand is Montmarte, M-O-N-T-M-A-R-T-E, and it was 2 colourless blenders in the pack, and buying it in store it was $4.95 Australian. So for $2.50 each, I thought that that was a bargain, and they work with all my markers as well. So what colourless blenders do, rather than really blending colour together, what it actually does is lifts the colour out, and you can use it to kind of move the colour back. You know, if you go out the lines, you can gently, you know, encourage it to go back by using the alcohol colourless blender on those areas. So what you will see is that initially it doesn't always come up as being very obvious, but as it dries, that area will dry lighter. And what I like to use the colourless blender for as well is just to sometimes create a little bit of texture by just doing some little dots and dabs in darker parts, for example, and that helps to just bring a little bit of colour back out of there and create a bit of texture. So if you try to do that yourself, you might find that it takes a little bit of practice. Going back to the Chartreuse green here now, it does need a little bit of practice to work out how it best works for you. But bear in mind that if you do not like what happens, you can wait for that to dry, and then you can put some more colour over the top of it again. So nothing is really set in concrete with it. If you don't like what's happened, you know, keep playing with it, or you can just come along with a darker marker and go over the top of that again. So all I'm doing here is using the deeper green to suggest a little bit of shadow under his fingers where his fingers have crossed over there. So just a little touch of it under there, and then using the Chartreuse green, the lighter green again, is just helping to blend that back in so that there's no real hard edges there. When you try to keep working while the ink is still wet, you don't get so many hard edges anyway, I don't think. So again, we need that for his feet. And what I try to do with the alcohol markers, or any sort of marker actually, is try to keep it out to the side once I've used it, because inevitably there will be a part that I have missed, like a little bit of leg like that. And if I put the marker back, I sometimes forget which one I have used and inadvertently bring a different colour in sometimes. So what I do is just, when I think I've finished with that, I'll set it aside. And the other reason to do that as well is that as the picture progresses, sometimes I will try to keep using this same colour, you know, where the main character is, take that same colour into other elements in the picture so that it starts to really tell a story, and you get that sense of flow and cohesiveness that, you know, it's actually making sense as a whole picture and story. Okay, so with his waistcoat, now I don't always, for example, in this book, it's a story that follows on. I actually didn't colour Mr Fogherty the same in each page, so I didn't use the same greens on every page. I didn't make his outfit the same on every page, so he's in a very similar outfit there. I didn't do that because I like each page to sort of stand alone as something a bit individual. So hopefully that lighting is okay. So let's think. We're going to go for muted. I want more muted rather than really bright. So I think I do have a couple of swatch sheets here that I could be looking at, I guess. So that blue's not too bad. With it, I might use one of the blue greys. So I might go for MG069. You know, if I can find that quickly. I've got the darker one, 170. This is always the problem with this particular set of markers being 200. It can be tricky finding the colours you want sometimes. So MG069, there we go. So not particularly scintillating viewing yet, I'm afraid. So let's start with his waistcoat. So I'm going to do this as a solid colour to start with. I'm going to try not to bleed past lines, but if I do, we can always find ways to adjust that as we go along later with either coloured pencils or some sort of acrylic paint markers maybe. So a little trick with alcohol markers that I like to use is try and start with your smallest areas first and keep moving, you know, so you want to keep moving. Once you start, you want to keep moving and try not to get any hard edges. Sometimes too, when I want a solid flat look, I will actually do small circles, you know, tight small circles. Working that way, however, though, it does tend to bleed through more. You kind of push that ink through the paper, and it can bleed past the lines more because the paper can only take so much at a certain time, and then it will keep bleeding. So keep that in mind. This particular paper, I live in Australia, so this is an Australian Amazon printed book. And this paper is already feeling much more absorbent than what my usual Amazon printed paper is for RJ's books. So I'm not sure whether they have changed paper supplies or whether it's a choice on his part, because I think sometimes they make decisions that and not necessarily what the artist has asked for. But it is very absorbent and it is going to start bleeding past lines very easy. So keeping that in mind, you kind of want to stop a little bit short of the line and allow for that alcohol ink to bleed. And if you've got any little white bits at the end, you can come back and touch them up. So what you can see has happened here already is that that first layer dried, and then I put more of the same colour on there, and we've already got a difference in the depth of tone of that colour. So if you don't have a lot of colours, so say you haven't got the B459 marine blue, this is the deeper blue, and you've only got the MG069, which is blue grey, which is this lighter colour here. If you've only got that and you don't have a deeper blue to work with, you can get a bit of a build up of colour just from laying down one layer of colour, letting it dry, and then coming over the top of it again. So that's what I'm going to do there, and I'm going to let that dry and see how it dries, because I would like the pocket to be a little bit lighter than the rest of the waistcoat, and also that little bit of, there's like a little bit of a hem around the edge there. We'll let that stay lighter as well, and I'm just going to try and imply that there is a bit of a shadow there. So that's those two colours done. I might use one of them to do stripes in the pants, but I want a lighter colour to go with it as well. So again, I might go for the blue grey range, but a much lighter one, which is MG011, if I can find it. I've got 031 there. Here we go. So MG011 is blue grey, and I'm going to do the rolled up cuff lighter. So it's like he's got the inside of his trousers showing. And I'm going to do stripes. So this is another one that I've used quite a bit, and it's already starting to dry out. But usually what I've been finding is that I turn over and use the chisel tip, and I can still get some extra colour out of the chisel tip for now. I need to save a few pennies and stop buying books and save some pennies and buy a new set of Ohuhus, I think. Trouble is, I don't need a full set. I only want some colours, and I don't think they sell individual colours or the refills yet in Australia. I've been finding that when I go online to have a look, it's hit and miss whether I can actually get what I want from Ohuhu at the moment. So I think they might be having some sort of a supply issue, and it's probably because they're so popular, which is not a bad problem to have, I guess. So I'm going to go back to the MG069, and I'm going to use that for the other stripe in his pants. And where I can see that there's going to be a very simple shadow or area that I need to be lighter, like in his face here, if it's not so clear cut what I'm going to want to do, I tend to just put the first layer of colour down with alcohol marker and then come back later to build those shades up, because it's very easy to go too dark too soon with an alcohol marker. And so sometimes I just want to get like a bit of flat colouring in to get the colours in, And then once I've got all the colours sorted out, then I will come back and do extra shadows and highlighted areas, quite often with the coloured pencil. So like for example, now that that's dry, if I go back to the MG011 blue grey, I can start to put some extra colour in on the bits where the fabric looks like it's all wrinkled and along the edge there, so then that starts to suggest that the cuff is shaped, you know, like a cylinder and it's not flat. So that will do for now, that's enough for now, and I will keep these colours aside so I know what I've used. His bow tie, I think I'll leave that for now. I would like maybe like a cream colour or off-white colour for his shirt. So I'm going to try, let's see what mushroom white looks like. It's not too bad, it's probably a little bit darker than I was thinking. This is shell white. Yeah, and that's getting quite dry. So E195 shell white, and it's going to be enough colour to just get something down on the shirt. So it will look like it's a very, very light beige or dirty white sort of shirt. And I'll do that all one colour to start with. I don't know if that will end up being a coloured trim on the top of his collar there or not, but for this point in time it's going to be all one colour. And his flat cap, I'm going to go back to the darker colour, which is marine blue, with the MG069 blue grey. So the lighter colour I'm just going to do along that edge and on his little visor there, and then this darker colour I'm going to do for the rest of the cap. And at this stage I need to loosely keep in mind that the moon will be casting a little bit of a white light on things because it's a full moon. Or I could even do a big yellow moon, I guess. So let's go back here and put a bit more dark in there. And that's gone very, very dark. So again, with the colourless blender, I'm just going to do a little touch of that along the edge. And I actually find, I think you get the biggest impact when you use this on ink that hasn't quite dried yet. When you use it on ink that has dried, I'm not sure you get quite an obvious look. So we'll just put a little bit there on the top of his shoulder to see, but you can see, you might be able to see that it's taking all the colour back out of that cap already there. I think maybe a brown belt. That's burnt orange, it's quite dark. That's better. So that's E679 Terracotta, and I'm just going to give him that brown belt. And again, I'm not going to labour over it at this stage. And I'm going to use that E679 Terracotta around the edges of the snail shell. and leave the inside light at this stage. And then I might use that Mushroom White E286 for the rest of the inside of the shell, and we'll play with that a little bit more to try and get that highlight looking in the center of the shell by just putting a little bit of darker terracotta . And that's in there to start with, and I'll use that terracotta on that bit there as well. And I think Snail, I normally do him sort of a browny green, I think. So I think what we might do with him to start with is I'll use a yellow grey, YG051, because it's a darker scene. I don't want him to appear too light coloured. So we'll do that for the majority of his body. And then that little bit underneath, we'll go for a lighter yellow grey. We'll go for, let's see what my lightest colour is. YG010, so see if I can find that. Here we go. YG010 yellow grey, and we'll just do that little bit of him there in that. So that, put that aside. The yellow grey is for Snail. Okay, I'm going to leave his bow tie for now because I don't know what I'm going to do that. His belt buckle will probably end up being maybe a silver metallic jelly roll or something. So now I might go for the boat. What will I do the boat? This is called Further Colour of Skin E989, and this might go dry as well, but I'm going to get started with it and see how much we can get done. So I'm using all the wooden planks to start with. I'm going to do it in this colour. And one of the benefits of these markers that are drying out, when you're doing something that's made of wood or maybe stone, when the marker is drying out, you can see how patchy it's looking. You can actually use that to your advantage. So I'm going to try and concentrate a little bit of darker colour along that edge there. There's a little bit of hatching or line work there that Russell's done to suggest that, you know, there might be a little bit of shadow or texture there on that bit of wood. And the same over this side. Start with that. Bearing in mind later we can always use coloured pencils to darken up anything we want. And I'm going to leave that patchy because quite often rowboats made out of wood, the paint is weathered and peeling and rough and damaged by, you know, the salt out of the water. So they're not necessarily perfectly painted boats. And that's what I'm going to imply here, because I've got this really patchy drying up marker, but I like the texture that that gives. That's how I quite often get grungy results for stone and rocks and wood when they're old and so on. So we will do the details on the boat in a different colour. So let me have a look here. What have I got here? That's bronze, maybe a little bit dark. So this is called From Dust E371, and I'm going to go with that for these other details here on the boat. Now you don't have to use the same colours as me. Maybe you might like to make your boat look a bit jaunty. Pardon me, quite often I do boats as a white body to the boat, and then I use a lot of red for some reason for accents on little rowboats and so on. It's one of those strange little quirks that I've got in my head, that, you know, that's what rowboats are, or they are often made of like a natural coloured wood. But you can do whatever you like, and the way that Russell illustrates is so fun and quirky that you do not have to have any sense of realism at all in your RJ Hampson books. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want in any book. But I think when an illustrator works in a manner like this, that is such fun. It gives you a bit of, you know, free license to do whatever you want, you know, with total freedom. So I do love working with watercolours, as you know, but I do have to say that I've missed working in this manner with alcohol markers in a fun book. I've been colouring a few more serious pictures with the watercolours, but every now and again I like to get back to, well, not every now and again, I think maybe my preference is to work in this sort of thing. So I might do the rudder in a different colour just so that it looks a little bit different. So I've got a bit of a frog still because of the dry weather that we're having. It's playing havoc with hay fever and allergies and stuff. So I'm going to go back to that YG010 that I used on Snail, and I'm going to use this here for the, I don't know what it's called, but it's the bit where you sit your oar. And I might do the seats in that colour too. So again, what I'm doing is establishing the relationship about things so that when your eye travels around and it sees that colour, it's not a real obvious, oh, you know, Snail must be with him because they got the same colours. No, it's just a little association that, pardon me, your mind makes when it sees the colours. So the yellow grey will be handy for, I actually might do the rudder in that as well for now. Don't forget, when you're using a pale colour or a lighter colour like this, you've got the scope to bring other colours into it for a bit of variety, but if you decide you really don't like it, you can adjust it. So the YG051, the darker grey that was on the Snail, I'm also going to use that here where Russell's got a few little lines. And those little lines could mean a couple of things. It could be denoting that there's a bit of a shadow, but it's also a way that some artists suggest that there might be a little bit of texture. It's not a completely smooth surface, so you make the call when you're looking at your picture whether you think it means shadow or what does it mean. But I quite often like to use that to add that little bit of darker colour in there, and it just helps to start suggesting what things might be made of, that they're not smooth surfaces. And I'm going to use that grey for a bit of shadow over here on that that colour that we used there. What was that one called? Further Colour of Skin or something like that. And I'm blending it in with the yellow grey. So as it dries, I keep working at it and I keep blending it in until it gets to that depth of colour that I think that I want. So that's a good start there. Now we'll do the lily flowers, and lilies are really quite, you know, nice colour in daylight, but because this is moonlight, I'm going to try and keep it subdued. So this is E191 cream colour. Now I'm keeping that idea that it's nighttime and a full moon there and what have you will keep the colours sort of subdued, but I'm not really going to go for any gee whiz wonderful special effects with that either, because I don't know that this style of illustration really needs to go to that sort of extent. It's really just for a bit of fun. A bit drier again on that smaller nib, but the chisel gave me a good bit of colour there. So I'm also going to bring in a little bit of touch of colour into that. So I'm going to use, see if this one is okay, yeah. Pinkish Vanilla R192, and just in the inside of those petals there, I'm just going to do a few lines like that to suggest a bit of extra colour, but I'm not going to do it on the outside of the leaf, petal. We'll just do it on the inside of the petals. Okay, so next I think we might start going for the branch or tree or whatever it is around there. I actually tend to use grey a lot for things like that, and I like the warm greys. So let's get started with a warm grey. It's a bit dark. So this is warm grey 160 and warm grey 170. So I'll start with 160. And again, this might be one that's drying up a little bit because I use it quite a bit. So I did do a flip through, which is already on the channel for this book. I wonder how many of you are actually going to get this book. And do you have a favourite artist that you just auto buy like I do with these ones? I don't even need to see a flip through and I buy them now. WG 170 warm grey, the slightly deeper, darker colour, and I'm just going to start putting it in the area behind the mushroom there where it might be a little bit shadowed. And again, any sort of knotty bits, we're going to do it like it's a bit of a shadow, and also along some of the edges here. But I'm going to leave a little bit of white on some of these just for the idea of, you know, suggesting that it is a round object and that it isn't completely flat. And don't forget, with these things, you don't need to be absolutely manic about making sure everything is totally realistic, because the illustration style is a lot of fun. And these things that we do really are just little tricks to give the viewer a hint about what it is. But we don't need to make it look like the real thing. We don't need to make it look like a photograph either. We're just helping the viewer to know that that is not a flat object, it's actually a tree. And the green will need to be reasonably subdued for the leaves, so I think I might actually use a similar green to him. I might use that combination to start with, so that's the G468 and the G487. And again, I'm going to start with the darker colour at the bottom there, quite rough. And then I'm bringing that chartreuse green down to it and helping it blend. And I'm doing it quite haphazard at the moment because it doesn't need to be solid. And I may even use a touch of another colour on the edge of those leaves as well. So I'm just taking it at the base of the leaf and then next to that middle vein of the leaf a little bit, and then coming out lighter. And I'm going to leave that quite rough for now because I might take another colour into the edge of those leaves. So I'm not trying to make these look like a particular leaf. I'm not, you know, looking at it and thinking it's got to look like an oak or a beech or, you know, whatever sort of tree. This is just for the effect and using the colours that blend in again with this figure so that you're getting that nice sense of a composition about it. And I might also use, that was the From Dust, I might use that, little touches of that at the edges of the leaves. Because even in make-believe land, the leaves don't necessarily have to be all one colour. So that's the chartreuse. I'm just using that to help blend that back into the main part of the leaf. So all those little white bits that I left along there are now getting a touch of that in there. And I'm just blending in that hard edge. So play with the order that you put things down. Sometimes I put the lightest colour, then the next colour, then back to the lightest colour to blend. And then sometimes I do the darker colour first and blend the lighter colour up to it. And you do sometimes get slightly different results. And the best time to play with something like that is on an item like this where you don't want everyone to look exactly the same. You want that little bit of variety happening, and play about with it, you know, and then you can see what you like best. So this is the cream colour, and I'm just going to come back to these last little bits of white that are showing and put that light cream colour into it. and I went up the centre of that leaf with the cream colour rather than the grey earlier. And the darker green for G468 Petits Pois is what I'm going to use for the gosh, can't think of the word, buds for the lily. And I might do the, while I've got those here, I'll do the lily pads in those. I'm not going right up to the edge. There's a bit of a line around the edge. I'm going to leave that lighter. And I'll go back here with the Chartreuse green. And that fine end is just about completely dry now. I feel a bit sad that they're drying out, but by the same token, it makes me feel pleased that I've actually used something up before it's dried up. So I've just put a little bit more of the Chartreuse back down on his feet there, and I'm just going to try and do it over the little bits of the fingers where they're overlapping and there might be a little bit of shadow. So I did a page recently in Johanna Basford's World of Flowers with gel pens, and the reason I did that was I've got some gel pens that are drying out before I've had a chance to use them, and I've got some other supplies doing the same. This is the bronze green. I'm now going to use that with the Chartreuse if I can for the bank there. So I'm just going to do that around the bits that are closest to the water. That's the 554 bronze green, and then use that Chartreuse green. On there. So yeah, I've had you know, some pens and things that dry up before I've got to using them, and that's just such a waste. And some of the gel pens I actually discovered I did not like them at all. The quality of them was not great. They were just bought from a cheap department store, and they've now been discarded. So I did a little bit of mindless colouring and tested out the various gel pens and so on, and decided that no, I'm not going to keep them. So when you do actually use your supplies up and you get your full money's worth out of them, you do get a little sense of achievement that you've actually done that. So that's a different plant. Again, we'll introduce a different colour for that, I think. Okay, these mushrooms, I don't want a bright red because I normally think of mushrooms as being red for some reason, but because it is muted and dark, you know, in the moon, I'm actually going to do it in E180 Shallow Camellia. And it's a really unusual colour, this. And I'm going to leave those little spots and lumpy things white. So along with the rowboat, I do have a thing about red mushrooms. When that's dry, I'll put a little bit of darker colour on there as well. And then I'm going to use the cream colour, E191, just to put a little bit of colour on the stalks. And then this plant here, I'm actually going to use one of the browns, I think. E371 From Dust. So I'm not going to make that green at all. And I've not gone right to the edges there, so I'll use a lighter colour, shell white, just to blend in those lighter edges. And then do that whole leaf there in that colour. And then those plants there I will do in a darker colour again. I'll do the bronze green G554. Again, not solidly doing the whole leaf. And then I'm using the G468 Petits Pois to just go on the edge there. I don't know that it's making a lot of difference. Those two colours are very similar. And then just a little bit of darker along the edge of the grassy bank there, and the same up there. Now that shallow Camellia E180, I'm going to do the base of all these, I don't know what they are, little bits in there. And then I think we need something sort of yellowish. So Y488 Shallow Earth to do those little bits on the end. I don't know what they're called. We'll do that there. Actually, I won't do his bow tie in that colour. I'm going for some really different colours this time. I normally do Mr Fogherty in really bright, vibrant colours, but I just feel like giving him lots of nice muted colour. And I'm actually going to use that for the clock, so because I'll suggest that that's a gold clock. And I'm going to leave the face of the clock white for now. And we'll use From Dust to suggest a bit of a shadow underneath that top part of the clock there. And again, just there on the bottom of the clock, just to give it, you know, that bit of a hint of something going on different, so that it's not all a solid colour. Do we want his pocket watch to be that colour? I can see that I've missed a little bit of that boat there. While I'm thinking about that, I'm just going to go over RJ's little hash scratchy lines there and do another darker shade of that colour. Now under his leg, or behind his leg there, that would appear to be sort of shadowed. And underneath the pocket watch would be too. And around there. So we're just starting to build it up in bits, in layers. So this pipe, I'm going to do it the same colour as the shell there. So that was the Terracotta E679. And I'm just going to leave a bit of a lighter section in the middle that we can put with the cream. We'll go for the shell white just to, so that again implies that it is round. But we wouldn't have a highlight on it on this side, because if the moon's there and the light's coming from behind him, then it would only be a very slight reflected light that's showing on this side in technically, if this was a real thing. And that terracotta I'm actually going to use for his spots that he has. So again, that terracotta I'm going to use for the roof in the building in the distance. Again, that's another thing that I often like to use red for. So I'm just going to use that colour. And I've got the Further Colour of Skin E919. And I'm going to do the house and the chimney in that colour. And I'm actually going to give it a yellow door, so the Shallow Earth. So again, similar colour, well, it is the colour of his bow tie, but that's there in the distance in a very light colour. Yeah, I think we'll do the pocket watch in that colour as well. And his buttons on the waist jacket only, not on the shirt. So the moon, I'm not going to leave it white. I want a very, very pale sort of yellow, creamy off-white yellow, I think. So I'm going to go for Y195 Primrose. And I'm actually going to leave a bit of white showing in areas. And then I'm going to do that highlight on the water in the same colour. Another one that's starting to dry out, and there's a bit of a problem here because this is a small fiddly bit and I've got a great big chisel nib that I'm having to use for it. Do the best I can. I can always come back with a coloured pencil and tidy that up if I need to. So again, just roughly, quickly colouring that in. I don't mind if it isn't solid. If it's got streaks, it doesn't matter because reflections on water aren't necessarily, you know, completely solid colour. And so all these ripples in the water I'm going to do as that yellow for now. I think that's the continuation of there. I'm going to try and put a suggestion of that into his hat. I don't think it's going to work. We'll see. But really speaking, any reflected light from the moon is going to be at the back of him. We're not actually going to see that. So you don't need to put a lot of yellow on things that the moon is behind. You really only want to put it on things that you know, that it's shining on directly. That's a bit hard to describe, isn't it? That's another lily pad there that I missed. So like it might be more fitting to put it on some of these things, but the way that the perspective of this is, it would be behind Mr Fogherty technically. Just put a little bit of that into that flower. Now the colour that I've got in here, I want to go a little bit deeper than that for the sky, but I don't want to go really like a navy or anything like that. So I'm thinking, will this be, yeah. So this is the MG 170 blue grey. So this is a deeper colour again of what we've got going on here. And I'm going to do the night sky in that colour. I don't often work this dark, to be fair, and it makes me feel a little bit nervous when I work so dark. I usually like my, you know, the darkest things to just be sort of accent for contrast rather than a feature of the colouring. So this might be something that needs 2 layers of colour. We'll see how patchy it ends up, but I'm going to keep trying to work in these sort of circular motion, working back over itself. And there's these little circles that if I obliterate them, I'll have to come back with a acrylic paint pen. Sometimes the moon gets that glow around it, so what I might do is leave a tiny bit of white, and then with a white Prismacolor pencil later do a white or pale colour glow around the edge of the moon if that doesn't bleed up too close. So I mentioned in the flip through video, if you have seen that, you will have already heard this, but if it's new to you, then Russell has his own website where he shares some free downloads, and you know, he's doing a giveaway at the moment with the release of the new book, so you can go and check all the details of that out and so on. But he also sells colouring packs where you can buy individual pages as PDFs. So if it's not in your best interest to have a whole book, you can just purchase PDFs and print your own pages. And he also does colour-alongs now on his YouTube channel. So you can purchase colouring packs so that you can colour along with him rather than buying a whole book if you don't already own the book. I'm just going to use that colour in the windows because it's night time. I'm going to do the house is dark. That isn't too bad. It's a little bit patchy, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to leave those sort of lighter areas around the stars and the moon so that I can do that glow effect. Actually, no, that might actually look too obvious if I'll do the glow effect, but I'll have that coloured up to the moon so that hard edge is gone. There we go. And then that colour can then start to come in anywhere where I want a deeper shadow on these bluish things. I might have to take a break in a little while because it's getting really close to dinner time here, or the evening meal time, so I need to go and make something for dinner. My husband has got used to not ever knowing whether his dinner is going to be ready for him or not when he gets home, because sometimes when I get so caught up with a colouring book or page, I'm still sitting here colouring when he comes home, and dinner hasn't even started yet. Luckily he's okay with it. He never gives me a hard time. Just blending in that hard edge there. Okay, so we've been colouring for over an hour. Gee, I'll have to do this in parts, won't I? I'm liking the way that that's going so far. So I might try and make a list of the colours that I've used. We're starting to pile up quite a few here. I'll come back really soon and finish this page off. See you then. Okay, so I'm back to finish this one now. It's actually the next day for me, and I've been trying to work out what colour I want to use on here and been having a bit of trouble with what I think I want the water to be. So I'm going to start with MG069, I think, which is blue-grey, and we'll see how that goes, because I don't want it to look, you know, super vibrant. As I mentioned earlier, that I want it to be subdued colours because it's night time. And I'm guessing, you know, I don't really know, but I think the nighttime sea would look quite dark in this sort of situation. And as I said before as well, we're not looking for 100% realism here. It's a fun picture. I might just get some paper towel to put down here because I've had hand cream on and my hand feels a little bit clammy. So I'm just going to put some paper towel down just for me to rest my hand on, because I don't want to make the paper greasy. So it's actually quite hot here today. The forecast was 38 or 39 degrees Celsius, which is well over 100 Fahrenheit, and it's been really sunny and hot through the morning, and now it's sort of getting into the afternoon. We're supposed to get a cool change this evening, so it's come over a bit cloudy, and it is extremely windy, so I'm hoping that we don't have any issues with that. With the hot weather, and wind is always a bit frightening. So I'm just going to try and work out what's going on over here. So you may hear a bit of noise because it is so windy. I've got a couple of pot plants hanging outside my window here, and they're blowing about in the wind. And there's just sort of general noisiness from the howling wind. And I've been awake since 3 o'clock this morning. Curse of insomnia and pardon me, the life stage that I'm at, sleeping can be difficult. But also it was very warm last night, so that didn't help either. So what I'm doing here is I'm just trying to go really carefully next to these lines. I don't want to go right up to the line. I'm letting it bleed towards the line. I don't mind so much in this bit where the reflection is on the water, but I don't necessarily want it to go into snail. Excuse me for that frog. That's kind of funny, isn't it? I'm colouring a frog and I'm complaining about having a frog. So after posting the flip through yesterday, there was quite a big response of people wanting to see this book coloured on screen and for colour alongs. So I hope that this suffices as a colour along. I will make a note of all the colours that I've used. One thing that does bother me about doing a colour along is not knowing really what the most popular supplies are going to be. I know a lot of people have Ohuhu alcohol markers, but I think it's reasonably easy if I tell you that I'm using a blue-grey, for example, like this, that most sets will have a colour that's blue-grey, and it won't be identical, but it will be similar, so you can make substitutes pretty well. I'm planning to maybe use a few Arrtx pencils on this one as well, but I don't know really what are the most commonly owned sets of pencils, because I don't want to use something like polychromos and then have it out of the reach of most people. And you know, I love things like Crayola, but not everybody does. I don't have things like Arrtx, Black Widows, you know, all those sorts of brands of pencils, because not all of them are available in Australia, and some of them worked out being quite expensive. So maybe what I'll have to do is do a community post and put a couple of different brands of pencils down and see which one comes out, you know, towards the top. I've got Cray Art pencils, I've got the Arrtx, I've got Prismacolor, I've got some different Derwent ones that are colour soft. So maybe it will be best to just make a list and then get a bit of a general consensus on pencils. But another thing is, remember that I am really keen for you guys to see what I'm doing and adapt what I'm doing to what you have. That's always been one of my things that I don't want to say, you know, you must use MG069, because if you don't have it, then for some people that can be a bit of an issue, that they worry about not having the right colour. And what I really want you to do is think, okay, well, Jackie's using blue-grey, what can I substitute blue-grey with to get a similar result? Or I don't like what Jackie's doing, I'm going to use, you know, whatever different blue you've got. I'm much more about really sharing ideas for techniques rather than colours. I think colours are a very individual thing, and we don't all see and appreciate colours in the same way. Now, the way I've done this doesn't necessarily work well with the clock here, so I'm going to stop there and I will use some pencil over the clock there. If I use alcohol marker, it's just going to obliterate it. Sometimes when you start doing some of these swirls and so on, they don't always match up. And there's nothing to say you have to leave that white either. You can actually colour all of that, you know, in the grey if that's what you want to do, the blue grey. Like, I think I might take that up there. Okay, so I hope that that looks okay. What does it look like through the camera? I think I've mentioned before that sometimes when you look at things through the camera, you actually see the tones and everything differently rather than the details. So that's okay, I'm happy with that. And I think this might have blown it out a little bit when I was using it, so I apologise if the colours were going in and out a little bit there. And then this is MG011 blue grey, and I might use that down here in these. I don't want to leave it white, and I don't necessarily want to use the yellow for the moon because I don't think that would look right, because the boat here would not be allowing that moon shine down here. This is more of a reflected light from somewhere else that we're seeing down here. Not to get too technical, but that's how I'm viewing it. And then I can use that lighter colour across there. So we can see the colours coming through the blue, but they're not as bright as what it is up there out of the water. So just back on the hot day that we've got here today, I've also got a ceiling fan going, so I don't know if you will hear that in the background either, but the air conditioner is on, and I also have the added ceiling fan because it is very warm in here. Okay, now I did notice I didn't do, you know, anything with that up there, so I'm going to use this yellow grey, 010, the very lightest yellow grey, to just put a bit of colour on that bit there. And that looks like it's some sort of maybe greenery on there, so that was just the G468 Petits Pois. A little bit of that there. So again, I'm just going to start coming back and looking for areas where I need a greater contrast, or you know, to suggest that there's shadows on Mr Fogherty here. Now we're getting to the point where we refine it with the alcohol markers, or we bring in coloured pencil. So MG069 blue grey, I'm going to start thinking about whether I need to put any sorts of shadowy bits here on Mr Fogherty's legs, so underneath his leg where it crosses over his knee there. And I might also darken this stripe up because it's getting lost a little bit with the sea in the background there, so I'm just going to make that one a bit darker. And then if you feel like you're getting a hard edge, you can feather that back out with some little dots to blend it in so it's not quite such a hard edge. I want that pocket to stay light. And I'm just going to do this sort of, these flat caps, you know, they're sort of rounded and look like they hang over a little bit, so I'm just going to suggest that. And really he doesn't need a lot more done to him, I don't think. This little area down here may look a little bit darker than the rest because it's behind snail and there's no, there would be no strong light coming from the moon there, even though I have put the bits of yellow in. You see that starting to bleed over the edges of the yellow a little bit, but I'm not too concerned about that. Might just put a little line of yellow on the edge of there to denote that the moon is on there, and just so that it makes a break between the water and his leg. I did say he didn't need much more done to him, but there you go. So the shallow yellow that I used for the bow tie, Y488, I'm just using that in the bits where the bow tie looks like it's got a crease, and on the edge of the bow, a little bit on the edge of the pocket watch, and there, but I'm not going to go into that bit under the water. And I'm going to add a little bit of that yellow in over on this side, just to help tie in again, you know, the sense of a relationship of the colours going around. Just darken up that little door a bit. And I might actually do some little marks on the moon. Let's get the Primrose back. Was it Primrose? Yeah, Y195, and we'll just blend so just to give the surface of the moon a bit of texture. And the reflection would probably be a little bit stronger up here. And I'm going to use the light yellow grey, Y010, in the clouds. So just to leave it so that it's not all white. So I'm just going along those edges. just so it looks like it's layers of cloud. You know, once again, it's not correct realistically, but it's just what I'm going to do to make a pleasant illustration, not necessarily be correct for, you know, a meteorological event. And that's fading a little as it's drying, so I'm just a little bit behind the house. And I'm going to do that also with the clouds of smoke from Mr Fogherty's pipe. So this is the lightest version of the yellow-grey YG010 that I've been using. For no reason other than it works tonally with all the other colours that I've chosen here. And I tend to just put a bit of colour on where Russell has put a few lines there, and then sort of follow the outer edges like that. That's really all I do. I'm not looking to make it look like real smoke. And then let's get the slightly darker one, which is YG051. And then we're just going to put that in there. Again, where those little lines are that Russell has put on there for us. And then I'm going to blend it out with the lighter one, just so that we don't get any hard edges. Might be a little bit darker down here behind him. So I think of it as being darker near him, and then as it drifts away it gets lighter as it dissipates. I'm quite liking that, and I'm also going to use that YG010 to start putting some details in here at the boat. So where there might be some sort of shadow, or for example I want to try and bring the lily flower forward, so I'm just going to slightly darken behind it so that it makes it pop forward. So it's not to make it look like a shadow, but just the mere fact that I'm darkening here slightly makes that lighter colour of the lily flower jump forward. And again, not being too precise, because I'm thinking about this being a weathered old boat, and I'm just going to use a bit of the darker yellow grey in there as well. So we're just making it look like it's, you know, got some wear and tear. One of my favourite things to do when it's a Mr Fogherty story is make everything look like it's a little bit aged and worn, like he's a little bit down on his luck, you know. He's a well-to-do gentleman, but fallen on hard times, or just, you know, that old sort of wealth that starts to wear out and look a bit faded. Is how I always think of Mr Fogherty. So I just want to imply that there's a bit of a shadow where that edge or lip of the boat comes down. It's sort of maybe that it overlaps the edge of the boat here. To help that assumption along a little bit, I might use the colourless blender and see if I can just take a little bit off of there, because I want it to sort of suggest that that's a little lip that's overhanging the actual boards of the side of the boat. And maybe a little bit in there, because that's the top part, that's the very top part. And then that's the side of that top part. I hope that makes sense and I just don't sound like I'm rambling. And also it just gives a little bit of texture to that area too and doesn't make it too solid. So I like the way that's coming along, but I think I'll put some pencils on there just for a little bit of added texture. And with the YG010 yellow grey, I'm just going to go over that bit of, I don't know what that part is called, but the edge of the snail there where it might be a little bit lighter, but I don't want it too light. Yeah, I'm quite happy with the way that's coming along. Now I'm going to put a little suggestion of the yellow into this shirt of his. So I've got the Y195 and I'm just going to put a little suggestion of it in there, so you know, like it's either a white shirt that's gone a bit grungy or it's just a very pale coloured shirt. And the shirt would have an overlap, so where the buttons are, this side will be on top of the other side there, so that's going to be a little bit darker perhaps, and then the side that's on the top will be lighter. As for the collar, the little edge that he's got on there, I think I'm going to leave that as it is. Just need a little bit darker grey on those parts of that. It's a rest for the oar, and just a little bit extra of the grey. This is the YG051, just to start darkening up some of those little shadowy areas. And then we need a little bit of YG010, the yellow grey again, because I've forgotten about this little bit of his pipe here, and I'm just going to blend in the bits where the blue might have gone over the line a bit, just to disguise that. And this embankment here needs a bit of colour on it, I've forgotten about that. So I'll start with the colour from Dust, E371. And then I'm going to use the grey YG051, yellow grey. Those little bits where it's in shadow, where the grass is overhanging, and then to help bring that rudder forward to the forefront again. And that's probably enough in there, I think. Maybe with the colourless blender, just lift little bits off there, just to make it look different textures. And that From Dust E371, I think that would be a little bit darker there, and so would that. Maybe there. Again, don't fuss too much if your line is a little bit wobbly. The boat itself is going to be old and weathered, so again, it doesn't matter if the lines are a little bit wobbly. And that Shallow Camellia E180 is what I used here on the mushroom. So I'm just going to put a little bit of a shadow under those little white bits because they're raised up a little bit on the mushroom. So it just gives you a little bit more of a sense of what's going on with that. And the colourless blender, I'm going to see if it will take enough colour off of this little part of the shell where it might be lighter. If you think about the shape of a shell, it's not flat, so that's what we're trying to imply there. Okay, I'm going to go into some pencils now, but I'll show you what it looks like now, and you could stop here. You know, there's no reason why you couldn't stop and call this quits here. There's the texture in Mr Fogherty's face where I used that colourless blender. You can see the boat is starting to get a bit of a mottled, you know, scruffy look about it. So I don't see why there would be any reason that you couldn't leave it at this point if you wanted to. But today I feel like adding a little bit of extra pencil onto that. So let's put all those colours aside so I don't forget to make a note of those. So my Arrtx are in a coloured pencil case. I've got the larger set. I forget how many are in that set. So that's what I will be using, but you can use any coloured pencil you want. And to start with, to get a sense of the shape of things, I'm actually going to use a Prismacolor White, because I think the Prismacolor White is the best white pencil for going over the top of darker colours. So I'm just going to put a little suggestion of that along there for now. I want his eyelid to look a little bit lighter on the top there. I also want to lighten that off just a fraction. Make it look a little bit lighter than it is. I'm going to suggest there's a little bit of a lighter bit across the top of his nostril. So these fingers here I want to look like they are on the top because I've got the shadows underneath them. And I'm just doing this because it's a bit flat and I don't want to put that heavy marker on there as well. And I'm just going to put that on the very edge. And then I'm going to take the side of the pencil rather than top of the point and just do a little bit of a light sort of feathering of pencil over the top, and I'm just going to do that in a few different bits to make it look like his waistcoat is a bit shabby and a bit dusty and, you know, maybe past its prime. And the same with the hat, I might do that in a few areas. And little touches like this, little attention to detail, don't overdo it because then it loses all its impact. And I'm just going to run that along the edge of there, just so I can tell that that's the edge of his leg and the water is behind him. A little bit into the center of that cuff so that we can get a bit of a sense of the cuff is rounded. And I'm just going to do a little tiny bit in the tips of these. Just, it's a very barely noticeable, but it will just lighten the tips up a little bit. I shouldn't really be doing that with my finger. When you get the pencil crumbs, it's easy to smudge them. So this is a Derwent fan brush, and it's got a little silicone tip for smudging pastel and stuff like that as well, so I just use that to flick those little bits off. Now I'll start doing the same thing on here, and the reason I'm using white is it's going to lighten it up a bit, and then I can put another colour over the top of it and knock that back. But if it's too dark, some colours won't work. The little bit of white underneath it just helps to get that contrast going. So where the marker was running dry down here and it was very patchy, I'm just exaggerating some of those bits that are lighter now, just to start that little narrative that the boat is old, and that is very old, you know, scruffy wood or paint. If you've done it in a colour, you can suggest that it's cracked paint. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm just doing it where the marker was a bit lighter. And then what I can do with the darker bits, I'm going to use, this is Camel. Gosh, I'm having trouble seeing the numbers on that. You'll have to believe me that it's Camel. And so where the marker is a little bit darker, just very, very lightly, hardly pressing at all, just accentuate some of those darker areas with that. So remember again, we're only making suggestions for the viewer to fill the gaps in themselves. You don't need to be a great artist and draw every single detail in, but by changing the tone and little bits of texture like this, you're making the suggestion to the viewer that it's you know, weathered and old. You don't have to draw every little line and crack, and I mean, you can if you want to make it look really detailed, but you don't have to. And then see, we can go over the top of the white and it just knocks it back slightly. There's still a highlight there, but it's not in your face. And I might go for a slightly deeper colour. I don't really want a warm colour. I want it like a sepia or an umber or something. Maybe the sepia. I don't want a warm brown, I want a darker brown, just to start suggesting some of the darker, grungier, muckier, sort of dirtier areas and shadows. Don't need a lot, just do it in light layers. You don't have to press hard. And if you're unsure, you just do light layers step back, have a look at it, assess it. If you don't, you know, if you're not too sure about it, walk away from it for a while. And then on these areas, I'm just going to do a few. I've got very, well, it's not blunt, but it's a rounded tip on there. It's not a sharp tip, and I'm just using that sort of lightly to start putting some idea of texture in there. And I'm going to use that up here as well. I think I'm going to sneeze again. Phew. Excuse me. So hopefully this is translating onto the camera, that it's just helping to make it look that little bit grungy. It's not a brand new boat that he's floating around in here. And we're going to do the same on the plants, just to tie everything together. I'll use that same colour, and it will work well because I've used all the muted colours. And I'm also going to use that on this little bit of a tree trunk. So again, looking for the little lines that RJ has left to denote texture, or, you know, where a shadow might be. Not pressing very hard again. And I don't want it to look super blended. I want that rough texture, so I want the colour underneath to come through, because tree bark isn't all solid. It's not all one colour. And a little bit here where the grey hasn't really darkened it as much as I had hoped for. So the grass is overhanging this little bank. And then where I've got the light bit where I used that colourless blender on the edge there, the bit that is behind it will be a bit darker, make that recede. Could even use that a little bit under Mr Fogherty's cap there, where he would have a shadow from the peak brim of his cap. And maybe a little bit in the fingers where you know the other finger is overlapping and above it. Could even use a little bit on his vest too. And all that does is it just helps keep tying everything together, because you're using the same colours. A little tiny bit on there and the clock, but not a lot. And then with the white, I'm going to just go over the bits that would be, you know, the highest point of the watch. And again, if you think about where if the light source is coming this way, what would be the lightest parts of the clock? And with that camel, I'm just going to imply a shadow there and a bit of a shadow there. And with the camel, I'll do that on the shirt as well. So remember, you don't have to use black to create a shadow. And we might put a little bit along the edge of the, is that the tiller? Is that what that's called? That moves the rudder? I don't know. I don't know much about boats. So I feel like the inside of the boat would look a little bit more subdued than what the outside of the boat is going to look. And again with that white, I'm just going to put some very, very light scribbles along that edge. And then what I'm going to do with the moon up here is I want a really pale, sort of creamy off-white colour. So what is this one? This is cream, and it's very blunt. I'm not going to sharpen it, and I'm just going to do some very light sketchy lines around the moon to suggest that glow, and then just come a little bit firmer at the edge of the moon itself. So I'm thinking about how sometimes at certain times of the year the moon's very yellow, and then maybe just do a little bit of that for a bit of texture, so it's not completely flat. And then I'm going to get a pink. So for this one I'm going to use blush pink. Did I say what that one was called? Cream. A little bit of blush pink just in here, and I'm using that a bit of pressure, not really hard, but just a bit of pressure. Just in, you know, coming from the center of the flower out. Of course that's in the background, so that wouldn't be all that detailed. And this sepia, I'm just going to use a little bit underneath the edges of those white bits. And a bit just up the edge to help suggest that it's more rounded. And the colour has bled into those little white spots. So I just need to get my acrylic paint marker. If I can put my hand on it, which, here we go. So I use the Montmartre acrylic paint pen, but any sort of white gel pen or white acrylic paint marker. Just make sure that it's going. So I'm just going to do that in those little white lumpy bits that are on the mushrooms. And I'm just going to tidy up these a bit to look a bit more like stars instead of indistinct blobs now that the marker has bled. I'll just put a few more dots of varying sizes. Now when you're doing dots to suggest stars, don't do them all the same diameter and the same size and colour, because when you look at the night sky, they're not like that. You know, you get some that are really bright and you get some that are teeny tiny pale, barely visible specks. So just remember that. Just put a little touch of that on his eyelid there. And put a little tiny bit down where I've got no highlight on there, on the pipe. And I'm going to do a little touch on the very middle of that lightest bit of the shell, just to give that shell a bit of something. And I'm going to put a few dots on snail's skin, and also a couple of little white dots just on Mr Fogherty. And I think that's really all that it needs. Now you could work at this over and over and over, of course, until you cover all the alcohol marker up, but I don't plan to do that. That's not how I normally work. So if I was working on my own off camera, I would probably be really happy to say that that is actually complete, I think. So I'll show you there with the moon. You can just see there's a little bit of faint glow around the moon. Really subtle. You can see now with the hat and Mr Fogherty, it's got that dusty, faded sort of, you know, look about him, hasn't he? Now let's get the boat. So you can see that I don't blend all those colours in, I've left it really rough. So along the edges where the marker was a little bit darker, I've just put these little tiny bits of pencil. You see the texture that I've left on the top of the boat there and in here. So there we have it, our first page in Lost in Time, a Mr Fogherty colouring book by RJ Hampson is done, and I'm happy with that. It's quite subtle in its colour palette for what I normally would choose, but I am really happy with it. So thanks for watching. I hope that you're going to colour along as well. If you're on Instagram and you post your images, please tag me. It's Spare Room Studio, all one word, so you can tag me, and that way I will see your coloured pages. And if you really want to, there is a hashtag that was created by Joe at 120 Colours, and it is inspired by Spare Room Studio. You could use that hashtag as well, and I'll go and check that hashtag out from time to time. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your support, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.